What's up, duelists? Before we get into today's video, I got to tell you guys about a couple of tournaments this weekend. At Sunday, I'm going to be going to this tournament. It is a 1K tournament where you can win either a Starlight DD Crow or two Ultimate Rare DD Crows, which sounds awesome because I love DD Crow and it's one of my favorite Edison format cards. So yeah, really cool stuff. If you guys want to play against me, come hang out. I'll be playing friendlies as well after the tournament, hopefully, given the time. If I'm not, in the finals, then I'll definitely be playing friendlies and just hanging out, having a good time. Come check it out. And then, of course, October 7th, RBET Orlando. If you're in the area or if you're not in the area, come through. It's going to be the biggest Edison tournament this year, so don't miss out on either of these. This one's going to be really fun. I think the DD Crow tournament's going to be pretty hype, so see you guys there. All right, before that, no, that's it. That's all I had to say. That's pretty much it. This is what I'm playing into today's video. Man, this deck and I, we go way back, and I've adopted a few tech cards from Tommy Dang because he has been consistently topping in SoCal and recently won a PlayStation 5 tournament. I don't know if you guys saw my video on that with fairies. So I've adopted a lot of his tech, and by a lot, I mean a couple of cards. I adopted Soul Release and Nobleman of Crossout in the main, and we are also not maining Book of Moon in this list, which I'll get into in a second. And I think that these are pretty solid inclusions because with Fairy, against the decks that don't set monsters, you beat them pretty easily. So a Dead Nobleman of Crossout's really not the worst thing in the world. And then with Soul Release is just a way that game one you can control your own graveyard for Christia, and it can also banish double Treeborn, or it can banish Hero plus Water just to like keep your opponent off Miracle Fusion. It just does three different things that the deck needs, and it does it all with just one deck slot, which I actually think is pretty important. On top of that, it can set up for your Alchemists to loop things back, and it can also set up for your Return from the Different Dimension to have a big power play in the middle to late game. So I think this is a cool tech from Tommy, and I think I'm going to be trying it a lot more moving forward. I haven't really drawn it, but we'll see if it comes up in these matches, We'll see. Sideboard, I've got a couple of other things that I've adopted from Tommy, the Proto Cyber Dragon, and that's it, really. Then there's a couple of things that are my own tech. I really like Needle Sealing in this deck. I think this is one of the best decks to utilize Needle Sealing because you can just sit there and do nothing. This is like one of the few decks in Edison format where inevitably you will beat your opponent. This deck goes infinite if it gets time and cards. And it can also stop any sort of OTK thing thanks to Herald of Orange, Honest, Trag, and Gores. I am using Tragodia in this list. I did side him out a fair bit. I'm not sold on the card, but I think game one, it is such a powerful card, and the effects are so powerful that it's worth including in the main deck, at least for now. Normally I'd have Book of Moon in this slot, but I wanted to have 24 monsters to make sure my Alchemists hit as frequently as possible. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We are playing 2 Legacy of Yatagarasu. The more I play this card in this deck, the more impressed I am with it. I think it is the best Legacy deck in the format. I think there aren't very many other decks that can fully utilize Legacy except for maybe Blackwings, because Blackwings also has a high density of hand traps between Kalut, Crow, potentially Trag Gores as well. So I think Legacy is good in that deck, but it's definitely good in this deck because you have hand traps that you can draw into. So if your opponent goes Heavy Storm, hoping to OTK you, you can Legacy and still not be defenseless. And oftentimes the Legacy will actually draw you into your defenses, which is cool. In the sideboard, Double Breaker, Double Compulsory. This is the response to Vayu Turbo decks. This is a response to Raikou decks. It's a response to Light Mirror. It's a response to everything. I think you need to have Double Breaker, Double Compulsory in this deck. Every time I play it, I side it in very frequently, and I'm happy with it all of the time. So I think that it's just like pretty much necessary to side it. I'm siding one Freed to help you combat deck dev from Blackwings. It's just a good card. It pressures people. It blows things up if you get deck dev'd. If you have to Herald early, it can get you your plus back. It's just a really solid card. It can control your graveyard for Christia or for return as well. There's a lot of matchups where Freed is just like MVP, mostly against Blackwings, so I like to side him in there. Another knock, so we can have 3 total set hate going second. We've got 1 knock in the main, 1 mind control, and then another knock in the side. Important versus Raikou decks, or decks that are going to be setting annoying defensive monsters. And then Double Thunder King to help us just play through DDV and play through Gadgets, Machina, Ancient Gear decks can be really annoying. Thunder King can be really useful there. So That's pretty much it. I'm not sure if I'm sold on the pulling the rugs. I think they're great. I was maining them at Nats, but they're great game 1. Game 2 and game 3, they're worse. So I'm not sure if I'm sold on these yet, but they're just chilling there for the time being. Let's get into the first match. This is by far, one of the most technically challenging decks to play. So we lose a die roll against Mental Bicep, and he's playing plants. So he starts off with Lone Fire, activates the effect. There's nothing we can do. He goes Gigaplant, Equip, Supervise, and this is just an insane start in general versus most decks. And we don't have Herald. Normally we'd have Herald here. It would work. Now, one thing to note is that Tommy does play Royal Oppression in the main over Return from the Different Dimension. So I'm kind of like keeping that in the back of my mind. Like, would Royal Oppression be better here than Return from the Different Dimension? He activates Lone Fire, summons Titanial. We draw Heavy Storm, so that's a way to at least get rid of his back row and his Supervise. But we still have just so much pressure to deal with. I set Card Trooper. I can't afford to summon it because I will take too much damage. There is a thought process that if I summon it and I mill 3, I can maybe hit enough fairies and I crash into Gigaplant and I draw into, I don't know, fucking Gores, something like that. I might be able to win this game, but I just think that we need to stop the bleeding. Here he goes, normal summon Gigaplant, priority to special Lone Fire, I chain Bottomless Trap Hole, because I want to clear the Gigaplant and keep it banished. He activates Lone Fire, revealing he does play a second Gigaplant, so I'm getting a better idea of what his deck looks like. He's got Deep Prison, which is a card that I can very easily play around. He's got Supervise, Lone Fire, and Titanial with double Gigaplant. So it's telling me his deck is actually pretty inactive. There's a lot of cards that not only can I play around, i.e. Deep Prison, but all of these like plant monsters that can just sit around and do nothing. Like I can just hold a Herald for that or Honest Them or whatever. I can figure it out. So for game 2 and game 3, I'm like already planning my sideboard. I'm trying to get an idea of what his build looks like. What cards would you have to have cut to play Deep Prison in a deck like this? He attacks over Card Trooper. We draw a card. It's Nova Summoner. And I'm thinking because he has Deep Prisons, he's not very likely to have something like Trap Stun or Giant Trunade or ways to like just shove through multiple back rows. So I'm keeping that in mind as well. We draw into Nova Summoner, so that's going to be a way to exist for at least another turn. We're going to normal summon Nova Summoner, attack the Gigaplant. We just need to get this out of play, but he has a second Deep Prison. So from what we've seen so far, and this is something that I think a lot of players should be doing that aren't doing, is when you see your opponent's build, like when you see their first 10 or so cards, in this case 7 cards, we've seen functionally 10 cards because we can assume they're not playing only one Supervise, right? And we can assume they're also playing Mirror Force because you wouldn't play Deep Prison unless you were also playing Mirror Force first, right? Because Mirror Force is just a better card most of the time. So we can assume 10 cards out of their deck already. This is something people should get better at doing. If you can see someone's build like this and you can assume what's in their deck and you know what to play around for the next few games, it can advise your plays and it can give you wins where you normally wouldn't have them. It can give you pro reads where you normally wouldn't have them. It can give you like just great chances in general. So what I'm seeing here is like, okay, Deep Prison, probably Mirror Force, triple Supervise, double Gigaplant, Titanial, double Lone Fire, and probably some number of plant tuners. So this is all in my mind. I'm thinking probably Mark of the Rose as well. We can play around that in certain ways. So we attack, we get banished. I'm forced to return back the Nova Summoner here, and unfortunately, we can crash, but then we guaranteedly lose. We'd have to crash Nova Summoner and special summon another Nova Summoner in defense, but then he gets to normal Gigaplant. He can special out Lone Fire, and then we just fall way too far behind. I feel like it's best to just go for Honest over the Gigaplant. Hope he doesn't have another normal summon in his hand. And then when he attacks with Titanial, I'll call Card Trooper, get another draw, and hopefully hit like Mirror Force or something that can stabilize me. He asks, why not crash then summon? It's because I'm making a play to win the game and not a play to not lose the game. He summons Tuned Magician, which I decide to ignore because I don't feel like a deck playing the Deep Prisons like this is the stereotypical Gemini deck that I've seen before. But it is a little bit concerning that he does have Tuned Magician in this deck because that means he could potentially have Gemini Spark. It means he could potentially have Imperial Iron Wall. Lots of cards that it throws me off, basically. Because so far up until this point, I've thought, okay, it's like a Gigavice deck with like UFO turtles to find Lone Fire. Like that's what I'm assuming it is. Like a really low monster count, tons of back row. and lots of equips, right? And you just hope to hit Lone Fire Supervise for your big plays. But that being said, last turn he didn't go for the Power Tool Dragon play. So I'm like, okay, he didn't go for the Unbreakable board when he had Lone Fire Supervise going first. So maybe he's on a bit of a like Gemini crossover hybrid. Either way, we lose this game and we need to sideboard. And now I'm like pretty confused about what's in his deck, because he is definitely playing a Brew, a combination of cards we've never seen before. Titanial in the main alongside Tomb Magician is very strange. So for siding against this deck, I did elect to leave in one Nobleman, but I didn't side in the second one because I still wasn't certain if he was on like that UFO thing. That being said, I can probably force him into a position where he has to set a monster. So I'm safe leaving in at least one Nobleman. I sided out the Soul Release because I think Compulsory is very good versus these Gigaplant style decks. You just compulse the Gigaplant back to their hand in response to Supervise, and they fall very far behind. I think that Breaker is going to be very good because he demonstrated not only equip spells like Supervise, Mark of the Rose, but also multiple copies of Deep Prison, which Breaker's going to be very good against. And then I'm assuming, if it is the Gemini deck, if he's not playing Imperial Iron Wall, then he's probably playing Light Mirror. So I am going to preemptively bring in those Breakers. I brought in the Compulsories. I brought in the Dust Tornadoes, and I did bring in the Cyber Dragon because I do predict that he could potentially make Power Tool, or he could potentially have like, I don't know, UFO Turtle or something like that. I don't really know. I don't fucking know. I just brought in the Cyber Dragon because why not? So yeah, I do have the two Compulsories, the Breakers. I think I had some number of Dust Tornadoes and Cyber Dragon. What I sided out in this matchup was I sided out Trigodia. I think he's a little bit low impact. He doesn't do much to answer a Resolve Gigaplant or Resolve Titanial, so I sided him out. I sided out that Soul Release because, again, I don't really think that this matchup's going to come down to the graveyard. I sided out one Legacy. I sided out Return. I think that oftentimes you can side out one Legacy and it's pretty safe. I left in Trap Dust Shoot because I was going first. I sided out Raikou. Raikou's pretty terrible against both the Gemini strategy and the Titanial Gigaplant strategy, so it's a pretty easy side out for me. I think I sided out Brain Control. I can't really remember. But yeah, I think I sided out Brain Control because Brain Control is like, it's not very good when they have Titanial in play. And it looks like his game plan is to get Titanial in play, so I sided that out. And then I think I sided out One Dimensional Alchemist as well to make space for all of those cards. Those are usually when I'm siding, I usually side out one D-Alch. Sometimes I side out a Warrior Lady depending on the matchup. This matchup, Warrior Lady is fantastic, so I leave it in. In this case, we're siding out the Raikou instead of the Warrior Lady. Sometimes I side out Card Trooper, but usually he's pretty good. I left him in this time, but I think I side him out for Game 3. I don't fully remember. Just because it's a proactive way to get Christia set up, and it also makes our Call of the Haunted a lot better. Sometimes I side out Solemn Judgment. I'm actually very quick to side out Solemn Judgment, Brain Control. I think these two cards are not as live as you would imagine them being. I often side out Return. I often side out one Legacy. And sometimes I side out Dust Shoot, Trag. So like those are my first go-tos to siding out. I'll almost always leave in all three Heralds because I think this card is like the best. Even against decks where it's not good. Like I think it's still really good. Even against like Hero Beat, if they have Divas, it's like not that bad to leave in like two of them. And it gets your graveyard set up pretty quickly for Christia. It plays through Light Mirror. It stops like the high impact like plays that fuck with your shit. Like if I'm playing against Blackwings, right? I don't really give a shit about Summon Bora, right? My whole deck beats that. I don't even really care about Summon Shura because my whole deck beats that. And I don't even really care about Summon Sirocco. So like none of that stuff bothers me. But the stuff that does bother me, which is Blizzard into Bryonic or Dark Armed, Herald of Orange Light stops that. The only other thing that this can be bad against is like if your opponent is siding in a bunch of deck devs, but sometimes you just have to fade the deck dev, honestly. Especially with builds like this, where we don't really have a great dedicated way to handle deck dev besides just siding in 6 monsters that don't get hit by it, and then just praying it's like a 2-for-2 or something like that. Our opening hand is pretty bad. We do have that one Legacy though to kind of dig further. We do have Nobleman plus Compulsory plus Typhoon, so we can stop like a turn 1 power play. And his deck doesn't look like the type of deck to rush us down anyway. So I'm going to set 3. And this is pretty bad into Heavy Storm, right? But he's playing 41 cards, so he's less likely to open Heavy Storm. B, he might not even have Heavy Storm in his deck. If it's like a heavy back row Gemini deck, he might not even have it versus us. C, if he goes for turn 1, like Lone Fire Supervise, and he has Blind Typhoon, which is more likely to be in his deck than whatever, I would rather have 2 cards down that can interact with Lone Fire Supervise in both Space Typhoon and Compulsory than have 1 card down because he could blind Typhoon, win a 50-50, and then just beat us. That's like the only way we're really losing this game besides like Heavy Storm plus the nuts. And I don't think he has Heavy Storm plus the nuts. Like, he'd have to have a pretty fucking good hand to have Heavy Storm plus Typhoon, or not Typhoon, plus, what is the card? Plus, in this case, it's like still only a 2-for-1 because Legacy's chainable, so, I mean, it's fine. He sets a monster, passes. I'm just going to knock this. I don't want to deal with, like, flip UFO turtle attack me. We hit a Dandelion, I'm like, that's pretty darn good. I'm just going to pass the turn. I have Mirror Force. I have Call of the Haunted. Mirror Force is great because now, even if we do get Heavy Stormed and he, like, sticks a Titanial, we can actually come back because we have Mirror Force. Here he just sets a back row. End phase I'm going to Typhoon it in case it's Dust Shoot. And here we see Light Mirror. So now from this point on, I'm going to be very careful about when I use my Typhoons, when I use my Dust Tornadoes, when I use my Breakers, because I need to make sure that they are used on an active Light Mirror. I draw for turn and I draw Freed, so that's a good amount of pressure. I am going to summon it and attack. My opponent set a Light Mirror, so I don't think they have Gores. I'm just going to Legacy first to see if I draw a Shining Angel, which is a better summon. I don't. I draw yet another trap card, but I'm okay with drawing another trap card here. I'm going to attack with Freed, set that bottomless, again to play around that Typhoon, and deal 1700. He doesn't drop Gores, he doesn't do anything, he just passes to his turn. So now if he summons Lone Fire, goes into Gigaplant, we just bottomless it. And then if he tries to like DDR it back or some shit like that, we have Compulsory. If he tries to blow up our board in some way, like let's say he goes Heavy Storm, I may actually chain Compulsory to protect my Freed, to bounce it to my own hand, because I don't want him to like Brain Control, sack it for Gigaplant, or like Brain Control, summon Copy Plant, or Nettles and make a synchro with my monster. So I may Compulsory my Freed in response to a Heavy Storm here. It also protects me if he goes like Lone Fire plus Mark of the Rose. We can bottomless what he Lone Fires into, and then we can Compulsory our Freed in response to the Mark of the Rose. So I wanted to have 2 cards down. Again, he doesn't have Heavy Storm, he would have played it last turn. He has to top deck it if it's even in his deck, and this protects us a little bit from Space Typhoon. He sets a monster, sets a back row, and passes the turn. Actually, sets 2 back row. So here I'm thinking, like, okay, his 2 back row are probably Deep Prison or Mirror Force, something like that, or they're Light Mirrors, or they're Bluffs, because his deck doesn't have that much room for back row. Like, you can only have, like, last game we saw double Deep Prison, right? Which means he also has Mirror Force, and then he has Light Mirror on top of that, and he set neither of these cards last turn, so I'm like, they're probably, like, Deep Prison and stuff. That's what's in my head, because that's what he had the most of last game. Either that, or because of that Toon Magician, they're like dead fucking Gemini Spark Ultimate Offering cards. Like cards that don't do anything to my Freed attacking. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to attack with Freed. If it is UFO Turtle, like he floats into Lone Fire Blossom, right? But then we still have Bottomless plus Compulsory to help interact. And then we've also got like, you know, some other trap cards we can set here as well to protect us. If it's not UFO Turtle, let's say it's something like, I don't even know what it could be. Another Dandelion. At this point, I have no idea what it could be besides UFO Turtle. So I'm just going to attack. So I attack. And it's Debris Dragon. But he thought a little bit before letting that attack connect. Which is a big tell that one or more of these, is Dimensional Prison. So we take 300. I go ahead and just pass. Because now that Debris Dragon is in play, if he summons a 3-star, I don't want to have my Mirror Force or my Call of the Haunted or my Shining Angel in play. Because if he summons a 3-star, I might actually let him nuke. I might actually let him Debris Black Rose blow up the field. Because that way, we're trading 4 for 3, actually. So we get card advantage out of the nuke. Even though if it's a Dandelion, he gets tokens. We trade 4 for 3, so we get card advantage there. And then we actually have a solid suite of cards to follow up with if he nukes me. So I'm playing around just top deck 3-star, summon that nuke. And then we also have cards to help deal with tribute, summon, whatever. Here we draw Solemn, and I'm like, okay, Solemn's a good card to commit, because if he has something like, I don't know, I don't even know what he could have, like his own Solemn, I want to have my own Solemn down, basically. My game plan at this point is to get Solemn down, and then tribute summon Christia, and then hopefully win that way. This turn he goes pass, we draw Gores. Now that's extra insurance. Makes me a little bit frustrated. I set the Solemn. I would have not set the Solemn if I had known I was going to draw Gores, but alas, here we are. We do still have that Gores. And even if we Solemn from this point, we drop to 3850, which means we can take at least 1 hit, so Gores will still be live. He goes ahead and summons Lone Fire, activates. I bottomless the Titanial, and he lets this resolve. So I'm like, you know, maybe he doesn't have his own Solemn. maybe he was just going for that for reasons, And he doesn't go for Mark of the Rose, which is good for us because we don't want to take any damage. Again, we want to make sure our Gorge is live after we Solemn. We draw another Christia, and I'm like, all right, I got to set up for this Christia play because things are looking bad. Our hand's looking bricky, and I just need to start forcing through the back row. Because he didn't Solemn our bottomless, I'm thinking I can tribute for Christia, attack. He's going to deprison. I'm going to Solemn the first deprison, and then from that point on, I can just switch my Christia to defense and never play it into another battle trap again. My read at this point is that he has double battle trap set. He just draws and passes, and so I go for this play because, again, my game plan is to Solemn the deprison, but then he does Solemn back here, and I'm like, oh shit, that's pretty fucking good. That being said, like, his life total is very low now. Ours is low too, but we have a card that is live and chainable, so our Gorz is gonna be able to hit the hit play unless he clears our back row, then summons a monster that's 3,900 or whatever, which is just very unlikely. He summons another Debris Dragon, so I'm like, okay, multiple Debris Dragons. Now I have a really good idea of what his deck looks like. It's probably like Dandy, Debris, Foolish Burial, Lone Fire Blossom, that sort of thing. Summons Lone Fire, synchros into, he tries to synchro into Power Tool. I tell him he can't, but I think he just misclicked. He tells me he misclicked. And then he summons this hideous Black Rose. And now I'm like, I have to win the game because of this hideous Black Rose. It is so, oh my god, it's just so ugly. It is so disgusting. I cannot believe people would choose to play the alt art of this card over the beautiful original art. Like the original art, like look at the color. Hey, take a second to look at the color on the original art of the Black Rose Dragon. Look at the way the background really lets this foreground of the beautiful monster pop. Now look at the color on this one. Not only is the red less saturated. Oh fuck, God. Give me the Black Rose Dragon again. There we go. All right. Not only is it less saturated, like you can see the red is brighter on this Black Rose Dragon. It's more saturated. It looks richer. It looks more real. And it pops against this like darker, like navy blue background, almost purple background. It looks so good. It looks so beautiful. This looks like it was drawn and then like it was like weathered, like it was out in the sun or some shit, and it got like faded. And the background is like this sickly green. Like this is a ugly color. This green in the background is an ugly green. It's more of a sea green, which doesn't make me think of roses at all. It makes me think of like the ocean or like water monsters. So it just doesn't fit this card at all. Like this artwork is so terrible. On top of that, like look at the neck on this dragon. It just doesn't look right. If you look at the neck, oh my god. Stop highlighting Deep Prison. Okay. If you look at the neck on this Black Rose, it looks correct. It looks like, okay, that is correct, right? If you look at the neck on this Black Rose Dragon, it just looks two-dimensional. It looks wrong. Like the front of the neck, it looks like it's in the foreground because of the way it's like lit up, but it's like not supposed to be in the foreground. Like the head of the monster is supposed to be in the foreground. This looks like he's like awkwardly like leaning back, but his wings are moving like way forward. It's just a weird motion shot of this card that doesn't look good. It doesn't look nearly as good as this, and it doesn't look threatening. Like look at this stare. This Black Rose Dragon's got this menacing stare. The original art has the menacing stare. This dragon, it just like, he's like uninterested. He's like looking at something else. I'm like, bro, what are you looking at? What that's over there? You know what I mean? Like that's nothing. If you look at his line of sight, that's nothing. Stare down your opponent. Make your opponent afraid. Okay, anyway, enough of this dog shit art. I obviously compulsory it because I can't stand the sight of it. All right, it's so hideous. I have to shuffle it back into the extra deck. Oh god, thank god I don't need to look at that again. All right, Gorz gets summoned. We get our token. He sets another background. I'm like, that's the second D prison. And I'm aware because I know he plays 2 D prisons. I'm like, it's either a second D prison or it's a light mirror. So I'm going to switch both, attack with Gorz. I am 1000% correct. We crash and trade with the Debris Dragon. And now I'm just crushing because I can just set Shining Angel, set 2, and pass the turn. And I'm winning. I saved all my plays for this exact circumstance where there's an open board and I have Mirror Force to stop attacks. I have Shining Angel to stop attacks. I've Call of the Haunted to bring back my Christia once I pitch it to Herald of Orange. He just passes the turn, and I'm like, I'm going for game. I'm going to call Freed. I'm going to flip Shining Angel, and I'm going to attack. And the reason this is game is, he could have Gorz, right? But if he has Gorz, I just Herald of Orange it. And if he has Gorz plus Trag, I Herald of Orange the Gorz. He drops Trag. Main phase 2, I banish my 2 lights that I just put in the graveyard and blow up his Trag. So I go up like crazy cards, you know what I mean? So yeah, this is just game. It's just game. And we go to game 3. So I won game 2 off the back of some like clever resource management, some clever reads. And game 3, I open up pretty strong. I've got Breaker. I've got 2 of my Noblemans, 1 of my main deck 1, and 1 of my sideboard 1. I sided a little bit differently going into the next game. Oh, let's zoom back out there. Yeah, so I sideboarded a little bit differently. This time I brought in both Dust Tornado, and I did bring in the Nobleman because I saw his build was like Dandelion, Debris. Probably in those cases, you are playing UFO Turtle and potentially even playing Raikou as well. So I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm just going to bring in the Knock because his game plan last game was to set Debris until he had a good hand. And that is not going to fly if I have Noblemans to banish your Debris Dragon, right? Like, it's not going to fly. I did not bring in the Pulling the Rugs. I was tempted to because of Debris Dragon, but only Debris Dragon as a target is not good enough. I brought out the Needle Ceiling because I figured because of how inactive his deck is, it's very unlikely he will actually resolve a combo through multiple compulsory, through knock, through breaker, etc. Like, it's very unlikely he will side that out. And in this matchup, I think I didn't bring in the Proto, but I definitely brought in the Cyber Dragon going second because he revealed Power Tool Dragon. So now I know more about his deck because of that little mistake as well. So yeah, we are on double Compulse, double Dust, double Breaker, Cyber Dragon, and Freed, I believe. And I sided out Return, Legacy, Soul Release, Brain Control, Raikou, Tragodia, probably 1 Dialk, probably... I'm not sure. I don't remember what else I sided out. Maybe 2 Deox? I don't remember. Honestly, don't remember. But I sided out that. I sided in those cards and sided out the other cards. I might not have sided in both Dust Tornado. I might have only sided in one. Because I'm on double Breaker. And like his deck, even if he does resolve Light Mirror. So the issue with Light Mirror, right? Like, let's say your deck is like Black Wings. And you have a lot of monsters that are like pretty solid stat lines. And they're repeatable and replaceable monsters in a lot of cases, thanks to Black Whirlwind. That means you have very good pressure, and Light Mirror is stopping the cards that you are attacking into, Nova Summoner and Shining Angel, as well as Dialk and DD Warrior Lady. So Light Mirror, really, it is a -1 if you think about it. Light Mirror is a hard -1 if you don't have monsters to attack with. And my game plan is like, okay, if he does have Light Mirror, his deck doesn't really have that many monsters to attack me. He's got what? Debris Dragon, can't attack over a Shining Angel or a Nova. Dandelion can't attack over a Shining Angel or a Nova. Like Gigaplant, you have to tribute summon that. Or, you know, Lone Fire into it, which we can stop with a bunch of different ways. Titanial, again, you have to Lone Fire into it or tribute summon it. So, like, all of his monsters that we've seen that attack, besides Tuned Magician, which I'm totally disregarding because after seeing the last game, I'm thinking the Tuned Magician does nothing and is just, he must have sided it out or something. I don't really know. I'm thinking that the Light Mirror is actually going to be a hard -1 for him. So really what the Breakers and the Dust Tornado are there for are actually the Equip spells and the Deprisons, which are more annoying for me because they make it so I can't just like ping him to death while beating him with my interaction and his deck naturally breaking. I summon Shining Angel, I Nobleman his monster, and banish his Dandelion. I attack for 1400 and he says, how are you keeping that in for literally 1 set card? Which is a funny use of the word literally because last game he literally set Dandelion and he literally set Debris Dragon. So that's literally 2 set cards. It's literally not 1 set card, which is funny. I said last game you set Debris and Dandy. So I remind him that he set 2 monsters and that Nobleman's going to be good against both of those. And it's going to be good against the hands where he needs to stall out. It's also good against potential UFO Turtle as well as Raikou, which I'm assuming he plays. Like, I don't know. Here I does shoot him, so we get a look at his hand. And you'll notice the hand is Debris Dragon, Copy Plant, Mark of the Rose, Titanial. And I'm like, you know what's super funny is that not only has he got literally 2 more monsters he wants to set here, but he also literally has a 3rd monster that he's probably going to set to turn on his Mark of the Rose, which is Copy Plant. So next turn, I'm just going to shotgun my 2nd knock and just be super far ahead. Yeah, so he's going to shuffle back the Debris. We're going to draw for turn, and like I said, I knew he was going to set the Copy Plant. We drew Dialk, and I'm like, even if it's not the Debris Dragon, it's better to just make sure that the Mark of the Rose is dead. I banished my 2nd Breaker, which is good because I didn't really want to draw a 2nd one here since he doesn't have any spell and traps that he really wants to set or anything. We knock, we get to deal 3,200 damage. So dropping him really low if he doesn't set that Debris Dragon, once again, we just win the game. So proving that he has at least 3 to 4 monsters that he needs to set to even be in the game versus our deck it shows that Nock was good to bring in this matchup. He draws DD Crow. I have to say that DD Crow is a very bad card to side in versus fairies because it just doesn't do anything. Like if you just banish one of their guys, like the situation in which it does something is like I have crashed 4 recruiters and I'm desperate. In which case you're probably winning anyway off the back of like marks. So DD Crow is not helping you there. Keeping me off 4 fairies is like, it's like trying to hold back a flood with like a bucket, you know? It's not ever going to happen with DD Crow. That being said, I think Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer is actually a very good card to side versus fairies because not only can it banish 2 fairies with 1 damaging thing, but it prevents that crash into Christia line altogether, and it can help you against, you know, their Soul Release, their DD Crows on your own strategy. So I think Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer is pretty good in this slot. And on top of that, I think Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer in his deck is probably better than DD Crow because Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer plus Light Mirror is like a pretty strong game plan versus fairies. Like it's just going to get you really, really far to have an 1800 monster with a Light Mirror in play. Like that's just facts. That does work against fairies. Whereas DD Crow with Light Mirror is like, you're attacking 2 parts of my deck that aren't what's pressuring you. Like what's pressuring you are these cards right here. You have to deal with these cards in front of you. He sets the debris, passes. We draw Honest, and I'm like, if that's the set debris, I'm going to Honest over it. I activate Dimensional Alchemist. I attack with Dimensional Alchemist. I make a bit of a mistake. I should have attacked with Shining Angel first. It's smarter to do that, but I think either way, I'm winning the game next turn. So we attack for 14, drop him to 2,000, pass the turn. He draws into Mind Control. He thinks for a while, and then he concedes the game. So yeah, as you can see here, we would have drawn Dust Tornado to help interact with Mark of the Rose. But yeah, I think it was good for us to bring in both Nocks. I think I'm pretty impressed with Nobleman out of this deck, especially in these sort of like plant control matchups versus Amaryllis Burn, which is picking up in popularity. I think Nobleman's very good. I think Nobleman's very good versus like Vayu Turbo versus other Hamster Raikou Lightsworn decks versus those types of decks. And it actually has a lot of application versus like Hero Beat and stuff too, because they could be on like Snowman Eater or Diva Hero, because they could be on like Sangan and stuff. So it does have application there. And even if you do draw your 1 dead Nock in game 1 versus Hero Beat or Blackwings, you beat those decks so badly it doesn't even matter. Like those matchups are literally buys game 1. So you can just adjust it game 2. All right, the next match I'm going to show you is against Al Burrito. Shout out Al Burrito. I believe he's played in a couple of our 8-mans. Pretty strong player. So we start off with Legacy. We've got 4 normal summons, which is pretty slow, but we did win the die roll, so that's pretty good. I think I lead on Card Trooper, ? No, I lead on T-Set. I T-Set a Recruiter and a Legacy. So ever since Nats and the last few tournaments where like Fairies hasn't been super popular and Zombies has completely fallen out of the metagame, for some reason, Zombies just hasn't been doing anything. I think the deck is a little bit... I think Zombies feels like an underpowered version of Fairies, in my opinion, but just because it's like the same battle recruitership, but you don't have Christia. You just don't have the end game of Christia. You don't have Inevitability. And you can't really win through Gores that easily. You can't really win through DD Crow or like other hand traps that people are kind of like min-maxing right now. So I think that's a reason why Zombies has fallen out of favor. But because it's fallen out of favor and Fairies is also very unpopular, the meta now is like attack. So I'm going to T-Set, and especially turn 1 when my opponent doesn't have information, I'm going to try to get him to attack into my Nova Summoner. Maybe I can float into a second D-Alk and just really get things going with regards to floating advantage. He Typhoons, we chain Legacy, just an easy +1. Honestly, we do draw another like kind of dead card, but I'll take a +1 any day of the week. He goes ahead and summons Card Trooper, and yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about. He reveals he is on Vayu Turbo. No deck plays Dark Refer with Caius and Card Trooper except for Vayu Turbo, as far as I know. It could possibly be Diva Hero, but it's very unlikely considering the way he used his Typhoon here. So he's going to attack into my set monster. With Nova Summoner, I'm going to grab Honest because I do want to find a removal spell. My hand lacks removal. So we're going to find Honest here. I'm going to bounce this Honest because if he has Torrential Tribute, I want to play around that. I'm going to summon Card Trooper. I don't want to represent Honest here. I don't want to summon Dimensional Alchemist and get owned by Torrential Tribute. So I'm just going to mill 3. And as you can see, I played around Torrential Tribute excellently. He does have it. I'm going to mill 3. I hit 1 fairy. So now we're at 2 fairies, which is pretty good. We're pretty close to Christia. I'm going to attack over his Card Trooper. I don't want to let him keep milling. I don't want to let him get to a 3rd dark very easily. He is going to activate, draw a card, and we are going to set our Mirror Force and pass the turn. He's going to set a monster, set a backward pass. We draw Solemn. I'm like, that's pretty good. I'm going to mill 3, summon Dimensional Alchemist. I know his set monster is probably Raikou, so I'm going to activate Alchemist, and if he does have Torrential, he'll be forced to think whether or not he wants to Torrential on my Raikou, on my Alchemist in response to the effect, and blow up his own Raikou, or if he wants to have a really bad Torrential moving forward, basically. So I banish the return, I attack into his set monster. It is Raikou, and he does decide to pop the Alchemist because, again, like, this Alchemist sticks around. It's so bad for him because his Torrential is like his piece of interaction, his main piece of interaction. And like, you just give me so many pluses and so much like activity when you activate Torrential here. You give me 2 new draws. So he's going to blow up the Alchemist. He does mill both Necro and Plague. So he has potential to go for a Dark Arm tier, which is pretty bad for me, but I did draw Solemn, which is a way to stop Dark Arm Dragon at least, if that's his game plan. I pass the turn back, but he does have that end phase Dust Tornado. So game 1 Dust Tornado is something that I believe 10FD popularized in this deck. I think it's pretty bad. Like, I genuinely think that Dust Tornado in Vayu Turbo is not a good main deck card. I think you should just have higher activity cards. I think hating out back row is not something you really need to do from this deck. Your deck plays into back row. That is like the strength of Vayu Turbo, is that Raikou pops back row, Caius plays into back row, Trooper plays into back row, Armageddonite plays into back row, Dark Refer plays into back row. Even the Vayu stuff, Burial, Dark Arm Dragon, literally your whole deck plays into back row very well. You don't care about Royal Oppression. You don't care about other power traps like Return and Call because you have your own Royal Oppression. So I think having main deck Dust Tornado is like genuinely pretty bad. The only reason you'd have it in the deck is for game 1 Black Whirlwind hate. But that's like literally it. And I think that it's just better to have a removal spell for like threats, because this deck does really well when both players are top decking and you have more threats or you have more removal for threats. But I think having these Dust Tornadoes is pretty bad in general. So he does hit the Solemn Judgment. If you are playing Vayu Turbo, I think game 1 Dust Tornado is not it, basically. He summons Sirocco. He attacks over my Card Trooper. We do take 1600. We do draw a card. If anything, I'd like to see something like Legacy of Yada, like in this slot. You know what I mean? Something that digs you to your power cards, like Burial and Dark Armed or Brain Control. Because if you don't draw Burial, Dark Armed, or Brain Control, this deck is very underpowered version of Quick Draw. That's how I feel about it, at least. We draw a new card. He passes the turn. I summon Shining Angel. He thinks here, confirming my suspicion that he does have Torrential Tribute. I'm just going to crash, go get DD Warrior Lady, banish his stupid Sirocco. He's not going to Necro Gardener here. He should have, probably, but he doesn't. And so we're able to banish the Sirocco, which shuts off future Armageddonite from getting him to Armed Wing. We special Christia, add back the Honest. He's forced to Torrential Tribute here. And that's just bad for him, because like I'm going to draw that Christia again, and I go up +1. So now I have 6 cards to his 3, and I'm just crushing. So yeah, I think, again, had the Dust Tornado been something like Bottomless or Deprison or even like Compulsory, you can compulse the Shining Angel, maybe shove damage that way. Like, that's pretty good, I think, at least, you know? Or maybe even, like, I don't know, just, like, literally something more high impact than Dust Tornado, something that deals with, like, actual threats. He was forced to Torrential there suboptimally. He does drop to 4, but he doesn't have great plays. You can see his hand. He's got Vayu, which does nothing now that his Sirocco is banished. Again, probably should have considered Necro Gardening to protect that Sirocco because his threat was Vayu. He does have Compulsory, he does have Bottomless, he does have Heavy Storm, but Heavy Storm kind of overlaps with the Dust Tornado and Space Typhoon in not really doing anything versus Fairies. Bottomless Trap Hole, not really doing anything versus Fairies at this point. And Compulsory, it's just going to bleed you more cards when you're already down. So yeah, sets the Vayu, passes the turn. I don't know why he passed the turn. He's hoping to get a little bit greedy here, but he knows I do have Honest, and he knows I do have the other Honest, I believe. Right? Does he know that? Yes, because I got it off of Nova, I bounced it, and then he knows I have the second Honest because I special Christia. So from what he knows, I can summon Honest, attack his set monster, pitch Honest to pump up my Honest based off his Value's attack stat, and then special Christia main 2, and then I get it in under Bottomless, and it's like, what do you do? Like, you have to set Bottomless Trap Hole here because you know, based off of the contents of my hand, the Christia, the Honest, and the other Honest, that I can summon Christia here. I summon Alchemist because I don't know why. I just wanted to do this. I activate Honest because, again, I special Christia, add back the Honest, and then pass the turn. He draws Gale. Here he's forced to go for his Heavy Storm, but it's like too little too late. Like, you should have done that last turn. You knew Mirror Force was my only back row. You knew Solemn Judgment was a top deck the turn I drew it. So, and you know I'm not drawing another back row because Christia's on top of my deck. So waiting on this Heavy Storm play is just wrong. Yeah, Heavy Storm's here. Gale, have the Christia, but that doesn't even out the Christia. I'm going to go ahead and activate Alchemist. Attack with both. I don't give a shit about Mirror Force. I don't give a shit about D-Prison. I'll play into both. Either way, I just want to put him on 0 cards and then just beat him down. Set the call, pass, he draws Solemn. Attack with both. Don't need to keep banishing cards out of my deck and giving him free info because this is a 2-turn clock regardless. Set Torrential, pass. He blind allures and then concedes. So yeah, that's kind of how this matchup plays out. I think if they don't have like literally hamster Caius on the play, it is almost impossible for Vayu to beat you game 1. Like, you should be able to beat them through just about anything that isn't like a crazy Burial, Brain Control, Dark Armed play. Other than that, like, Christia just crushes this deck. If they have Royal Oppression, then they lock out their cards that beat you, and you can just beat them with DD Warrior Lady. So Royal Oppression is actually better for you in play because they need to special summon using Plague and Dark Arm to ever beat you through your Recruiters and your Alchemist looping. And you don't need Christia to beat them, but if they don't flip Royal Oppression, then your Christia beats them because then you, again, lock them out of the plays that they need to make, which is Plague and Dark Arm. So game 1 should be very favored for you, provided you don't lose the die roll and get Hamster Caius. Outside of that, you just win, basically, with this deck. Now, game 2, it's a little bit different because they do have Deck Devastation Virus, and they also have Light Mirror in some builds. But if they do bring in Light Mirror, like, you have to understand, they're shutting off their own Hamster Raikou, which is like a big part of their good game plan versus you. So they have to have like conflicting game plans. In any case, how you side in this matchup is you side out Return, you side out Brain Control, I believe. You side out Solemn. Oh no, I don't know if I sided out Solemn. I think I left it in. Yeah, I think I left it in. You side out 1 Nova Summoner, 1 Dimensional Alchemist. You can side out some number of Honest if you want to, but I usually leave them both in. I sided out 1 Nova Summoner, 1 Honest, 1 Tragodia. I side out the... I don't fucking remember. I think I side out Dust Shoot in this matchup because there's not a single monster besides Dark Arm that you actually care about. So I think I sided out Dust Shoot, especially going second. I sided out Return. I think you side out Solemn and Brain. And then you can side out Soul Release. And I think I did side out Soul Release. And then you bring in Nobleman, you bring in Double Breaker, you bring in Double Compulsory, you bring in Double Dust, you bring in Cyber Dragon, and you can bring in Freed and some copies of Thunder King. But I think I brought in Double Breaker, Nobleman, Double Dust, Double Compulsory, or 1 Compulsory, and Cyber Dragon. And I sided out 1 Legacy, 1 Return, Dust Shoot, Soul Release, Brain Control, Tragodia, 1 Dimensional Alchemist, 1 Nova Summoner, and I think maybe 1 Warrior Lady. I don't really remember. I don't know. It's just a lot of like cards that you have a bunch of. You can side out like 1 copy of them, and it probably won't change your deck all that much. And then you can side out like cards that lose to deck dev. Basically, you just hedge against deck dev. That's the game plan. Anyway, wrong match. Hold up. All right, so game 2, we're going second. He starts off with the classic T set. So he's got the T set here. This is supposed to be the strongest position for Vayu that isn't literally turn 1 Grepher into deck dev versus us. We draw Breaker, and so this is kind of just showcasing the power of Breaker. You summon the Breaker first because if they have Torrential, they're kind of forced to play it. Otherwise, they lose it. You don't want to knock first and then have them Torrential your Breaker. So we go ahead and Breaker pop his back row. Another thing that's really good about this is last game, his bottomless trap holes were very bad versus us, so he probably sided them out. And that way, Breaker's just going to resolve through anything that isn't Solemn or Torrential. We blow up the D-Prison. I'm like, hell yeah. We knock his monster. That's going to hit the Raikous. It's also going to banish 1 for us. Another upside of knock is you immediately turn on all of your Dimensional Alchemists if you resolve it on a Raikou, which is pretty cool. Also, if you play the Mind Control on a Hamster, you can special summon your 1 Raikou as well. We attack for 16. I'm not afraid of Gores because I can Herald, pitch Christia, and then call it back. I don't set my Call of the Haunted here, which is misplay number 1 this game. What I should have done was set Call of the Haunted here because obviously my game plan is Herald, pitch Christia, and then just call the Christia and then win over the next 2 turns. But I didn't set it. I was like trying to play around too much shit, and then I make another pretty critical misplay here. He does have Dark Grepher. He pitches Vayu, and I have a Brain Lapse. So what you should do here is just Herald, pitch Christia, negate the Dark Grepher, and then you have Call for Christia, and then you win, pretty much. I don't know why I didn't do that. It would destroy the Grepher. It would be a 2 for 2. It would shut off him from potentially deck deving me. I would cut off his normal. It would set us so far ahead. But I don't herald here. I don't know why. I was just like, yeah, sure, you can have an armed wing. But then I looked at my hand. I'm like, oh shit, my hand doesn't beat an armed wing. Like straight up, I should have heralded this Greffer. For some reason, the brain lapse came in because I thought if I heralded Greffer, it would stop him from sending Sirocco, but it wouldn't it wouldn't destroy his Greffer. So I thought he could still attack over my breaker, but I completely forgot that herald not only negates, but it destroys as well. For some reason, my brain just lapsed. I was like paying attention to something else or whatever. But you should absolutely herald this Greffer here. That was a huge misplay on my part. Both not setting the call and not heralding. So yeah, now we are going to lose the position pretty badly for no fucking reason. We're going to go -1 on our breaker, which is all of that advantage that our game plan gave us. We lose immediately, which sucks. He attacks for 17 and then passes the turn back. We are going to draw a Shining Angel. So I get bailed the fuck out, basically. And I can summon the Shining Angel and attack into anything, more or less, because I have Call to bring it back in case it's Mirror Force. But I T-set. So, again, I'm just, like, kind of tilted because I misplayed. But I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, he stacks for Caius. We just herald it and we're fine. So, I'm chilling. He just goes Greffer. Oh, no, he goes Allure first. Banishes a Spirit Reaper. And I'm like, huh, interesting. Spirit Reaper is a tech that I think also 10FD popularized. I think this card is decent. I think it's okay. I think it's a pretty good card to have in your deck. It can buy you a lot of time against Absolute Zero decks when they establish an Absolute Zero. Sometimes you just need to buy time so you don't lose to that Absolute Zero hitting you in the face every single turn. It can buy you a lot of time versus Hero Beat. It can poke at hands if your D-Prisons resolve. It can bluff, Rykos. It can bluff Hamsters. So if your opponent goes like Dandelion, attack into it, like you're not losing anything by having a set Spirit Reaper. It can force brain controls. It can basically it forces an out, which is a pretty good card in this deck. I think this is good tech. I think Dust Tornado is not good tech, but I think Spirit Reaper is solid. He activates Dark Greffer, pitches Vayu, sends Plague. So that makes me very happy because if he went for the Sirocco, the second Sirocco, or even the second Vayu here, or the third Vayu here, that would have been much scarier. Like I honestly cannot deal with like repeated Vayu beat sticks with my hand. But him sending Plague is very good because not only does he have to go -1 to set that Plague in the graveyard, he has to go another -1 to summon that Plague, and then he has to go another -1 to synchro with something. So he has to go -3 basically to set up a synchro, and that synchro is going to go minus into Herald of Orange Light if it's Bryonic. It's going to go another -1, so it's going to be a 4 or 5 for 2 if I get to Herald Bryonic play here. So I'm pretty happy he sent Plague here. That being said, the Plague does represent some scary stuff. So if he can force the Herald with a Caius, then the Plague does represent something very scary. He can go like sack Greffer for Caius, force the Herald, then he can stack for Plague, make Dark End, synchroing with the Armed Wing, and then have not only the live Vayu plus the Armed Wing, but he can also have Dark End to blow up our Shining Angel. That being said, even in that case, we should be able to stop him because we can Herald pitch Christia, and then we can call Christia in response to the Plague. So we should still be okay. Because it's going to go ahead and just go to battle phase and attack. So revealing he doesn't really have Caius. He was just getting the Plague out of his deck. I don't think that play is very good. I think if you're just getting the Plague out of your deck, you should just hold the Vayu or pitch Vayu, send Vayu. We're going to float into another Shining Angel because I want to prevent him from attacking, and I also want to set up a crash line for us next turn with Archlord Christia through Mirror Force. He's going to set a monster and pass, but all of his monsters that are set now don't threaten us because all 3 Rykos are gone. So there's not anything he can set here that I give a shit about. I'm going to summon Card Trooper, try to hit some fairies. I hit 0 because, of course, we go ahead and crash with Shining Angel, but he goes Mirror Force. So I'm like, okay, that's pretty good because I get to draw a card here, and then I can just call Shining Angel, and I can do that crash play. But this is maybe not optimal to go for. What I should have done, so what I end up doing is I go Angel, Crash, 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 get DD Warrior Lady. What I should have done was actually crash 1 less time, get DD Warrior Lady, and then use Honest to out one of his monsters. And then main phase 2 special Christia, add back Honest so I don't lose to Brain Control. I make this really stupid play of going for 4 recruiters or 3 recruiter crashing and then crashing the DD Warrior Lady, banishing the Armed Wing to shut off his Vayu and shut off his Plague, which is really silly. This play does play a little bit better around Book of Moon, but it is much worse into Brain Control, which immediately loses me the game if I make this play, as opposed to the other play, which is crash twice, special DD Warrior Lady, attack over the monster using Honest, And then main phase 2, special Christia, add back Honest. And then I'll have DD Warrior Lady plus Christia in play, plus Honest in hand, as well as Herald of Orange, to be completely insulated from everything. Christia, add back Shining Angel. So this game, I made like 4 fucking huge throw misplays. Like, throw really bad misplays. But the deck just rewards me because he doesn't have brain control. And we did top deck that Shining Angel, which got us into the game. And we're just absolutely crushing. You'll see his hand. He has Dark Arm Dragon. He can't play off the top. He has Burial, which isn't doing anything in the face of Archlord Christia. So, yeah, game's over. We draw for turn. It's another Christia. We attack over the Greffer. We attack the set monster here. I take 400. I should have considered Honesting here, but honestly, I didn't want to. No pun intended. I'll just pass. The Call of the Hunted should have been destroyed a couple turns ago, but we catch that here. He goes Prohibition, naming Christia, but Christia's already in play, so at this point, it's not going to do shit. We go ahead and summon Honest, attack over the Nimble Mega. I do think Prohibition is a great card, by the way. I might even consider siding it in this deck. We attack for 2,500, and I bounce the Honest at the bottomless pass. He sets a monster, passes the turn. I summon Honest, I attack. It's Dinah, which would destroy my Christia, but I have Herald of Orange, so I'm just going to Herald of Orange negate that and not give him a chance to special summon a potential Dark Arm Dragon or utilize that Plague Spreader in his graveyard. Even though we would still have Herald of Orange to defend ourselves, I think just shutting him out with this Christia now is the best line. He says, love the channel. Much appreciated. So this is Fairies versus Vayu Turbo. If they don't deck dev you, you auto win. Like, this matchup should be very good for you. There's like very few circumstances in which their deck is good against you. One of those circumstances is they have Hamster Caius on the play and your hand is kind of bricked. That's like one of the circumstances where they can take control. One of the other circumstances is you go for that Christia in a misplay situation, or you're forced into a situation where you have to Christia and they have brain control to reversal you. And then the third situation, obviously, is deck devastation virus. But those are really the only 3 situations you should be losing to this deck. This deck should not be beating you regardless, unless they have Light Mirrors, which, again, is a conflicting strategy because if they have Light Mirror, then that shuts off their hamster game plan, which is one of the ways that they beat you. So, yeah, pretty straightforward matchup, I think, especially if you have, like, the Breakers and the Nox and the Compulses. Like, these 3 cards they do a lot of heavy lifting. All right. And the last matchup I want to show you guys is against Daisuke, in which I win the rock, paper, scissors, which is very nice. Obviously, winning the rock, paper, scissors is a good thing. And we open up pretty strong. So what I'm going to do with this hand is I'm going to set Legacy of Yada and I'm going to set Shining Angel. So the cool thing about set Legacy is it can keep your Gores live while also functionally pro-setting Heavy Storm. So like, it's like the regular Heavy Storm. You just don't set anything, right? And then there's the Pro Storm where you set your Heavy Storm. And then there's the Giga Pro Storm where you set Legacy and you don't set Heavy Storm. That's like the level 3 Pro Storm because it bluffs that you have a real back row that you don't want to storm into. And then your opponent will set multiple and then you can Heavy Storm them after you draw a card off Legacy. And then Legacy can also draw you a card deeper to Heavy Storm, which is pretty cool. We set Shining Angel because if he can out it, then we have Gores. And if he can't out it, then we win. So that's pretty much it. He goes Rhoda for Stratos. And again, the meta right now, with this hero beat shit being very popular, is attack the sets. So he's going to attack my set monster, and we're going to activate Shining Angel, and we're going to special out Dimensional Alchemist. My game plan this next turn is going to be Legacy, activate Heavy Storm, normal summon Shining Angel, crash into Stratos, grab DD Warrior Lady, potentially banish the Stratos. This is if we don't hit off Alchemist. If we do hit off Alchemist, we're just going to crash the Alchemist, and maybe set Raiko, or summon Shining Angel and attack, but probably just set Raiko. So he's going to set 3 past the turn. I activate Legacy of Yatagarasu to draw a new card. We find Return, which is perfect because we have Alchemist, we have Warrior Lady, we have all the things in the world to get our stuff. We activate Heavy Storm, and the opponent just quits because he got owned. He got owned on 7 different dimensions. This matchup, I think, even if you don't draw a Heavy Storm there, like, I'm probably winning because I just have card advantage. And once you have card advantage versus hero beat, you can just loop DD Warrior Lady and run them out of threats. I have Gores, which is great against hero beat. I have Raiko, which is great against hero beat. I have, Shining Angel, which they can't really play through that effectively game 1. It's just, I'm never losing that game. Hero beat is such a good matchup for Fairies. The only games, again, when you're really losing to hero beat is when they like spark you and they have multiple hero blasts and you don't have Christia. And that's pretty much it. Either that or they're playing the stun version and game 1 they have Skill Drain, Royal Oppression, and like that just beats you. Yeah, obviously, Skill Drain's very good versus Fairies. That card is insane versus Fairies. Game 2, the way you're losing, Light Mirror. So once again, just bring in the Breakers, bring in the Dust Tornadoes preemptively, and you can even bring in the Compulsories. One fun thing is if your opponent goes for a Hero Blast or a Spark, you can Compulsory to protect your Shining Angel, and then continue to put them in a back foot. Compulsory is just a chainable way to clear Absolute Zero. One card you do need to be careful of in this matchup is Neospatian Grand Mole. That card can get you if you are on the back foot. So sometimes if you see your opponent is on Grand Mole, you want to leave in those Heralds. And then if you notice that they are on Deep Sea Diva, you might want to consider pulling the rug because you have not only the Stratos as a target, but the 3 Deep Sea Divas as well. So there's potential there for some powerful stuff. I think overall, though, the matchup is pretty easy versus Hero Beat. Like, you don't need to do anything too crazy to beat them. Most of your sideboard cards are good versus them, and most of your main deck is good versus them. You just need to be careful of Light Mirror really is the only thing. Siding versus Hero Beat, sometimes you're going to side out Herald of Orange if they're not on Divas. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the big one. Depending on what their list is like, you side certain things differently. Yeah, that I know that sounds stupid, but like Mind Control Cyber Valley is something you can side out. Knock obviously gets sided out. Tragodia gets sided out if they have Skill Drain. But yeah, Card Trooper is really good against them. If they just summon Alias, you can summon Card Trooper, Crash. You're going to get a +1 that way. You're either going to win an Honest, or you're going to win the Alias for +1, or you're going to win a Gemini Spark for +1. It's just, yeah, the matchup's good. I don't know what to tell you guys. Fairy's best deck. It's a strong consideration for me going to the DD Crow tournament at Xanadu. It's like up there with one of the decks that I might take. I just think it's like, I think it's super good. Like, I just think this deck is like, I really don't understand why more people don't play it because of how good it is. Like, I understand, like, losing to Deck Dev feels bad, and losing to Light Mirror feels bad, but the situations in which you don't lose are so many, and the situation in which you do lose, your opponent needs a perfect storm. So it's kind of like, this deck is just crazy. I think it has a good matchup versus everything. Yeah, just, I'm like trying to think of the bad matchup. Like, Hero Frog's probably a bad matchup game 1. And Gravekeepers is a bad matchup. Glads can be a bad matchup if they have D-Fissures, game 2 and game 3, but game 1 is probably a good matchup. I don't know. I just think that this deck just beats everything. It beats Vayu Turbo, it beats Blackwings, Sans DDV, it beats Hero Beat pretty badly, it beats Diva Hero pretty badly, it beats Frogs, honestly, because you can just like set up the Christia and you win. And game 2, you have like insane sideboard for Frogs between Needle Sealing and Rugs. Like, you can also side more shit for this if you want to. Game 1 Soul Release is pretty good. Against Dragons, against the Disaster Dragon or the Trap Dragon deck, I think it's 50-50 because Drago is really fucking insane. So if they can like leverage their DD Warrior Ladies and their Dragos really well, you lose. But against the Dragon Turbo deck, Fairies is definitely favored because you have Herald of Orange. So like, if you ever draw a Herald of Orange, like, they're going to need so much to combo. They're going to need double what they need normally to combo you and attack you. So you have a good matchup versus Dragon Turbo, which not a lot of decks can say. So I just think the deck is really, really underrepresented, and I'm surprised that nobody plays it, honestly. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.